This podcast is brought to you by Ventilect, your tech recruitment partner for a changing world.
If anything that we can take from this moment in time that we're going through right now, either both professionally or personally, is that we should have gratitude and appreciation for the work we do. We should know our impact. We should make sure that we are valued. You think about the network like a spider web, and once you're in the web of someone's network, that's a forever web. But I think if you kind of create a 3-year plan of what you want to build or what you think would be impactful for the roadmap of the company, you end up really being really impactful as a TA leader.
Mikaela Smith, 20 plus years in talent acquisition. She's recruited and built TA functions at the likes of Twitter, Slack, and now at Chainalysis. I was absolutely delighted to have her on the podcast this week. We talk data, people, TA functions, external recruiters, and of course, her life and career rising the ranks of talent acquisition. What I loved about Mikaela was that she always wants to work at that next innovation, that next big thing in technology, and her career definitely shows that. She also gives perspective to maybe more junior people in the recruitment industry who are going through their first downturn. And maybe a lot of you can find some comfort within that. So anyway, I'll stop talking and I'll let Mikaela crack on. Without further ado, I'm Alex Bloisey, and this is Ventilect's very own podcast. Fantastic, super duper. Mikaela, we are live and kicking. I'm in London, you're in San Francisco, is that right?
Yeah,
today. So
San Francisco Bay Area.
Different times today. So let's get right to it. Let's kick into it. You've obviously been in talent acquisition for a while. You've risen right to the top. How did it all start out for you?
Well, like many people in talent acquisition, I obviously did not grow up wanting to grow up to be a recruiter. It's something I fell into. I was actually working in the fashion industry for years, and I was working for a small boutique fashion line, and the actual boyfriend of the CEO saw me at a bunch of different trade shows in Europe and in Las Vegas, and he said to me, "You'd be an amazing recruiter." And I'll date myself right now, but he just kept saying, and I was like, "What's a recruiter?" And he's like, "Oh, you help people find jobs." He's like, "You'd be an amazing tech recruiter." And I was like, "I don't even have email." At the time, that was a thing to not have email. So it was a long time ago. And he hounded me for almost 2 years. And he was a headhunter in the Silicon Valley and had been for years. And he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. And then finally I relented and said, "Okay, so what do I need to do to become a recruiter? What's the next steps?" And he said, "Well, send me your resume." And I told him I didn't have a resume. So he helped build a resume for me, had me interview at the agency he was working at the time. They took a chance on me. And within, I think, 3 months, I was their top tech recruiter and remained their top tech recruiter until I left. Being in that agency environment for 3 years, I absolutely loved it. I became known as the person to just give the purple squirrels to, so the hardest role to work on. I was always determined to find it. As well as being a woman of color, I always also wanted to see representation of myself. And so I always focused on finding what we call now underrepresented talent in my searches. And so I just really sort of made a name in the agency world of building these really deep relationships with people, just because that was what I like to do. And I was a naturally curious person. And I started building out teams. I was building out some teams for Charles Schwab. They became our top account because I was filling all these roles at a very low salary rate. And so they were really impressed. And I started to feel like I wanted to actually be able to see the tangible effects of my work. And that working in the agency, it's like you have impact on a bunch of different companies in a very small way. But I wanted to be able to have impact in a real tangible way, be part of the company And so that's when I decided to go in-house and got the startup bug pretty much right away. Joined a company called Voodoo, which at the time was pretty hot startup in the Valley. It was before there was streaming movies and on your phones and everywhere. And they actually had a set-top box to do streaming video. And it was actually built to be a lot more than that, but that's before smart TVs and all that sort of stuff. So went to work for them, and the rest is history.
Amazing. So you must have seen, I mean, your career's basically grown through the tech boom, the Silicon Valley boom, and you must have seen a huge shift.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of shifts. I mean, I remember, so that headhunter I told you about, the first company he tried to get me to work at was this little unknown, this new startup search engine called Google. And I laughed at him and I was like, you want to have me leave my full-time job to take a contract role at a startup called Google when we have Ask Jeeves, Yahoo, AOL. So I said no to that contract opportunity, which I will always remember. But I think after learning from that experience, I really, really started to get a pulse, and it's back to that natural curious nature that I think most recruiters have, but I really started to get a pulse on not only the work that I'm doing in terms of filling roles, but really speaking to technologists, founders, leaders of product, and really understanding the different waves of technology. So like I mentioned, when I joined Voodoo, it was before streaming music, streaming videos was a thing. We'd had Napster, which was streaming music. And then Voodoo was sort of like starting this sort of streaming video movement. Netflix was still on hard disks at the time. We had a deal that we were trying to negotiate with Netflix. We lost it to Roku, which ended up being a pretty big, it ended up being really hard on our business. But after that, I really started getting a pulse on founders and companies. And when I look back at my career to date, and I look at all the companies I've worked at, one of the themes that I've realized that has really resonated with me is I really love working for product defining organizations. So I worked at, when I first joined Twitter, social media, Facebook still hadn't IPO'd. Social media wasn't really a thing. No one really understood what Twitter was, except for a few insiders. Joined Slack. Most people, I had to explain what Slack was for the first 2 years of working there. And so I just realized that if I could have done my career over again, I probably would be a product person. I enjoy product, and I really enjoy the product innovation that tech continues to make, year after year after year. And that's what gets me excited.
So you've joined companies, you've sort of seen the wave, but you've joined it before the wave breaks and because it's all about timing, isn't it, with a lot of these companies when they really go boom.
Yes.
So it seems that you've tried to catch that timing, and you've done a pretty good job out of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been good so far.
Did you feel at those times when you were joining and you were seeing the growth in these spaces, say social media or streaming, did it feel like it was a moment in time then? Do you look back on it now and think, wow, that was a real moment?
Yeah, I think when I look back, I mean, I can't claim that I have a crystal ball. And am I having internet issues? Oh my goodness.
No, it's fine. So it records locally, so any connections won't get picked up. Issues.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm trying to close some of my computer is starting to sound like it's about to explode. It's here. 1 second. Sorry. Can you ask that question again?
Yeah. So in Silicon Valley, when all these startups were coming around, you joined Twitter just before kind of social media was really booming, and you trying to catch these waves. Did it feel like a moment in time then? Did you really think, wow, this is innovation, or do you look back on it now and really appreciate what that time was like?
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, you kind of there's something in the air. You get this feeling, and the best way I can describe it is, I mean, I've written about this, but it's people call it their gut, their intuition, spidey senses. But when you are working with a product or a group of people, or you're in a moment and you can see the tangible impact of your product having sort of real world effects. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of debate going on right now about Twitter and social media in general. But at the time during the Arab Spring, and being able to have people be able to not have to have their names and be able to organize using Twitter, there was a lot of amazing things coming out, giving a voice to the voiceless, that felt very special, and felt very impactful. And so, in those moments that, you're having a real tangible effect on the human experience. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And regardless of, how the business does or how well you do on the stock market, I think that as a technologist, as someone who enjoys technology and enjoys your work, it can be incredibly satisfying. And, it's interesting, with Web3, I think, people have various feelings around cryptocurrency. And obviously there's been some fallout recently due to some people that maybe were not operating as they should. But I think that the use case for the technology of digital currency has been really interesting to me. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to join Chainalysis is, one thing that resonated with me is that, due to no fault of their own, many people around the world grow up in countries that have insane inflation, right? Like, say you were born in Turkey, or somewhere in Southeast Asia, or a country on the African continent, and if your local currency is lacking stability, there's been real use cases where communities have used digital currency to create stability and to trade. And when you think about who decides the value of the pound and who decides the value of the US dollar and the Canadian dollar, I mean, who is it deciding this, right? It's definitely not the people, and it's definitely not the collective. It's a sort of, I mean, I'm not an economist, but I love the idea that digital currency is giving power back to people to be able to feed themselves, to do business with each other, due to no fault of their own, living in a country that maybe doesn't have that stability from an economic perspective. So for me, that was really exciting.
Well, I was going to ask sort of what made you jump into a Web3 company, and I think you answered that. So it's sort of that next technical innovation, although there's some big speed bumps, especially at the moment. But yeah, I mean, that's a big thing with cryptocurrencies is people say, oh, it's worth only as much as someone would pay for it, which is true. But yeah, the same could be said for fiat currency as well. It's also, worth as much as someone would pay for it. So yeah, so I mean, I was going to come onto this later. We might as well come onto this. Might as well come onto this now. So for people who listen to my podcast, my views on blockchain technology itself are, I think there's an incredible amount of use cases, whether it's in DeFi or, I've had someone on the podcast who did decentralized clouds. So tech companies' cloud costs have been slashed. And it's about the end user at the end of the day, just like with Web 2. If something is cheaper, faster, more secure, more reliable, because of blockchain technology, then go for it. Trouble is, I think, especially during the boom, was there were companies that saw this technology and just wanted to find a problem to solve, and they kind of went out it the wrong way. And then obviously there's been bad actors as well in the space, which hasn't helped the technology as a whole in terms of its reputation.
Yeah, and I think that, I think with any new technology, there's always going to be people that are going to unfortunately use it. There's always going to be, thieves and criminals, right? That are going to be trying to find ways to exploit it, take advantage of certain folks, take advantage of people, find loopholes. Unfortunately, it's part of the human experience. I wish, my utopia dream is that people use their powers for good, right? I think we all have superpowers. Those are all individual, and people can either use it to empower and help, or they can use it to be selfish and to try and take from others without regard of that impact. And so I think what we're seeing with blockchain technology is just that, right? Like, I think that there is an incredible amount of innovation happening. I think there's an incredible amount of really, really smart people who want to think about amazing use cases. You mentioned DeFi. I think one use case that I think is really fascinating is the idea of your digital footprint and being able to own your own data and being able to own, your everything from your passport to your driver's license to, your social media profile across everything, right? Like, why can't we own a wallet that contains our digital information and make it easier to travel and to interact with different sites and to do banking and everything like that? I think there's just a lot of incredible use cases for blockchain.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's also cheaper. It's also faster than sending money through the current version of the internet. I think often you hear about the climate impact with cryptocurrencies, and I am someone who is I wouldn't call myself a climate alarmist, but it is very, very top of mind for myself and my family to eliminate our carbon footprint as much as possible. Using an ATM or a credit card also has incredible impact on the climate. So I think often those articles are coming from while Bitcoin does have a huge sort of climate footprint, there are other digital currencies that don't, and all financial transactions have a climate footprint. So I think there's just different ways to look at it and detractors for different reasons. I do think that we're looking at an interesting time for Web3. I think that there's going to be most likely less venture funding than there was maybe a year ago, and maybe more cautious funding with new ideas and new innovation. But I still think that there will be some interesting use cases that come out of it. I think long term, I'm not someone that is like a pure crypto person. I probably never will be. I am a product person, and I just love technology.
Yeah.
So I'll continue to sort of follow Web3 and I think it's an exciting space for sure. I think what's another exciting space that obviously AI is very top of mind right now.
Yeah.
AI actually scares me a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we're literally we're recording this end of February. It's literally developing every day, but there's the AI wars between Microsoft and Google. I know people have been testing out the new AI Bing, and there's been some interesting stuff, but I don't know. I feel these two companies really want to get their products out the door, that the kind of ethical stuff that was maybe considered a couple of years ago, they don't have time and they're going to work it out as they go along. But then I think the same maybe with social media back in the day. I mean, you'd remember with social media, I mean, I was still at school when it really sort of, and it was like the Wild West. It was, you could say anything and nothing really would happen. It was just crazy. And I suppose that would be the same with AI.
Well, exactly. And I think to that point, I mean, what we've seen, unfortunately, that happened with social media without there being safeguards in place is there has been a radicalization of people around the world, right? We've seen from terrorism to from ISIS to domestic terrorism in the United States and in EMEA. A lot of that has happened through social media and through YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. And what I worry about with AI is because there's algorithms, right, that bring up news that you're attracted to. That's what becomes so dangerous in social media when people get into an echo chamber and they keep going down rabbit holes, or with COVID, obviously the conspiracy theories, and people go down these rabbit holes, and there is some truth in it, and then there's a lot of untruths, and that's how propaganda it happens, and that's how radicalization happens, and that's how division happens. So if you then give a computer essentially the ability to not have any safeguards in place, I just really worry on what I feel like it's way too close to like the Matrix, and they're starting to build they're starting to build robots to take us all out.
Yeah. Well, as with any new technology, you just don't know. I mean, no one ever foresaw all the stuff with social media really at the start, and you just don't know the downsides until it's way too late and all the damage has been done.
And I think that social media was people, and this is talking about computers, and so it's faster, right?
Yeah.
And they're not beholden on. So I think we have to be even more cautious and even more thoughtful around when we think about regulation and compliance and just what we're doing in the AI space in general.
Yeah, I think, from what people have told me, I think that's going to come later, because there's a lot of money to be made now. And as we know, kind of the world revolves around that. And I don't know, I feel the horse is bolted, and there's going to be some problems down the line, but they will just patch that up later. So there might be some reputational damage from these big tech companies, but I don't know. I feel like this is a moment in time as well. I know we were talking about that sort of when social media dawned, but I really feel this is a moment in time as well in technology, even with just like tech companies in general, how, we've had tech companies dominate for 10 years and there's new things coming along, and there's obviously been a correction in the market as well on the financial side. I don't know, it feels like a bit of a moment, but maybe I'm just being a bit sort of philosophical and pie in the sky as I get older.
I mean, I think we are in a moment. We are in a valley, right? I mean, I think here's the thing: is the tech is mountains and valleys. It has been for the last 20-ish years that I've been a part of it. This will be the third downturn that I've seen throughout my career in tech, and we will come out of it as well. And I just think, going into COVID was an interesting human. I mean, it was a tragic and horrific experience for hundreds of millions of people, if not billions of people around the world. But in terms of the tech space, it went through this weird correction through it where I think everyone didn't know how to deal with it at first. And then it was a pause. And then people started, I think, having this false sense of, well, tech is what's going to get us through. So we have to do growth at all costs. And so it was just growth. And now we're in a space where it's, well, at a certain point, how much growth is too much growth? And I've worked in larger tech companies, and I absolutely love the impact of working at scale as well. I think where I've personally not struggled, but personally not necessarily enjoyed it quite as much is that what I've seen historically in some of these larger tech companies is that the pace of innovation and the appetite for change and for the ability to sort of see outside of the bubble becomes harder and harder. And it's no surprise that a lot of these tech companies are having massive layoffs, because a lot of them have, I've heard time and time again, I won't mention the tech company in particular, but I've heard people say, oh, I'm going to go work there when I want to retire, when I want to rest and vest. And if you're known culturally as a company to go to make a bunch of money and not work very hard, how impactful is that company being? And, the larger the organization, the more important it is to be able to build really impactful relationships cross-functionally, which are 100% important. But I think when those relationships become problematic is when people rely on those relationships rather than the body of their work.
Mm.
And they end up over indexing on relationships and not over indexing on what's best for the business and what's best for the company. And so then you have, hundreds, if not thousands of people within the organization making collectively millions and millions and millions of dollars for those companies that aren't really working that hard and aren't really impacting the success of the business or driving innovation. And I think that's what you're seeing in these large tech companies is a little bit of the aha moment. I do worry, though, that some of the decisions that were made, because those companies depend so deeply on those relationships, that the people that probably are the least impacted, least impactful for the business, aren't the ones that were impacted in restructuring.
Mm.
So I just think, I challenge, and I've had conversations with senior leaders at some of these big tech companies where, part of my advice, guidance, perspective, take it or leave it, is just to really have those thoughtful conversations on, not necessarily going, first out, first in, but really looking at what people are driving, what innovation they're driving, what kind of programs they put in place, what new products have they shipped, and less about how much they're liked or even their engagement scores, because that can often mean just that they're really liked, but that's not always the best for product innovation in the company.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think it was a bit of an aha moment. I mean, those day in the life videos, I don't know if you would see them on TikTok or Instagram, and yeah, there wasn't day in the life working at X company, and there wasn't a whole lot of work happening in that video.
Really?
So,
I haven't seen those. See,
yeah.
I'm not a TikToker. I'm one of those people, like most people of my generation. I enjoy TikTok on Instagram sometimes.
Yeah. So you might see it. I mean, if you Google it, it's these people doing the day in the life, and they've got yoga, and then they're going to the free meal bar and the snacks, and then there's this drinks machine, and a bit of red wine, after they finished at 4 p.m. And yeah, it's not a good look. Not a good look at all.
I mean, here's the reason why those companies, we had all that at Twitter. I mean, we had our CEO at the time, he loved CrossFit. So we had a CrossFit gym, we had a yoga gym, we had incredible food. We had all of that. But we also, I think you can have that when you have people. I mean, I think the difference was we had, in large part, at least in those early days, we had people that were so behind the mission and the vision of the company that it was just like, it was a badge of honor to be a tweep and to be launching like new markets. And so you wanted to work, all the time. And you were happy to have an amazing dinner and to work out at work and then go back to your desk, take a shower, go back to your desk and keep working. And that's really what those programs were meant to do, is to try to drive it. But I think that, to your point, when the companies get bigger and bigger, they end up creating this culture of some people, are there to do great work, and some people are there just to take care of the perks, right? And I think that you need to have a really a very non-political, very clear, data-driven people organization that is able to just be able to measure that impact and just be able to have honest conversations around with senior executives so that they understand, what their teams are doing and what actually makes sense.
Yeah. Do you think this next phase in tech, scaling, and what we've seen in the last decade, do you think that will, so we have a dip now and then obviously things will pick up, but do you think the mindset will be different when the good times come again, in inverted commas? Because it was always, even before COVID, it was about headcount and growth and scale, hyperscalers. Do you think that will still be as much of a thing in the next decade?
I do. I think that it will become a thing, as much of a thing again. I don't think it will become much of a thing in the near future. I think in probably 6 years from now, it will be. I mean, even when 2011 happened, I mean, cost was cost was sort of very top of mind and investments were top of mind. And I think we just got so far from thinking about that ROI that there needed to be a level of correction. But I do think that growth is going to continue to be important in key innovation areas. Yes, I do. I just think that we're in this moment of time. And I also think that for people, there's a lot of people that entered the tech industry post 2011 in the last 10 years. And for those people, I think that there was one of the things that I noticed, especially people, I mean, not everyone, but a lot of early career people there was a level of, I don't know if entitlement is the right word, but a level of just like, hey, we should get, exorbitant amount of money, more and more. We need more perks. We need more this. We need more that. And I'm all for, treating employees well. I think that employees are the largest investment any company is going to make. And I don't believe in churning and burning talent. I believe in investing in talent and really making sure people feel that they can thrive in their organization. But I do think there needs to be a balance of this, like, I want to make this crazy money and spend $6,000 a month on my penthouse apartment and drive brand new cars all the time. Like, I think that that's just living in a bubble that the rest of society doesn't live in. And I think that there being some sort of balance is good for people. And I think people that are post 2011 that are seeing their stock holdings not be high and seeing, maybe they've gotten laid off for the first time, or maybe they're starting to think about their own budgets in a different way. I think that whenever we go through hard times in our career or in our personal life, I think it's always an opportunity for a tremendous amount of personal growth. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. So I think that if anything that we can take from this moment in time that we're going through right now, either both professionally or personally, is that, we should have gratitude and appreciation for the work we do. We should know our impact. We should make sure that we are valued. But I think having a level of personal humility and personal understanding of what is important to you as an individual is important, and not just being this like rose color, I work in tech, so everything's great. And does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's like
absolutely. So what advice would then you give to, say, maybe if we say TA as an example, who've just been laid off, post 2011, this is their first downturn, the world is crumbling, everything they've ever known, all the belief systems they've had in terms of tech are falling around them. As someone who's been through a few ups and downs over the years, could you give them some comfort or some perspective? Or is it all doom and gloom?
No, it's not all doom and gloom. So I've been laid off. I'm trying to think of how many times I've been laid off in my career. Gosh, I've never been fired. I'm very proud about that. But I have been laid off quite a few times. The first time it was really traumatic. And so I do have a lot of empathy for people that go through it. Like, first time is, especially when your identity is so tied up in your work, it's a hard thing to wrestle with. Second time, it was really much like, this is a thing. And then the third time I thought about becoming a Pilates teacher. And so I think that, my advice to people is that the only thing that you can control is how you react to your experience in life. Right. I mean, we can try and, being really impactful in our jobs, work really hard, be a good human, but the only thing we can control is how we react to the situations that come in front of us. And some are in our control and many are not. Right. And I think that building a resilience and whatever that looks like for you personally is really important. I think it's really important to, so one of the things I've always leaned on whenever I've gone through stressful times is I go into like workout mode. I'm like, get me to the gym as many hours that I can physically fit in the day. I know some people, it's like the wine bars, and those are fine, I think, short term, but like long term, I find for myself, I really need to exercise the stress away. And so I end up always getting in incredible shape, which is a great side effect of stress. And then just understanding that, I think one of the things that have gotten me to every job I've ever had is the relationships I've built. And so if you think about your career, less about just like the team that you're in or the company you're at, and more about especially in TA, right? It's all about our networks, right? It's like the network effect. And you think about the network like a spider web, and once you're in the web of someone's network, that's a forever web. And the relationships that I've built at the companies that I've worked at throughout my career are so important to me, and are so important not just from a personal perspective and how they can help me, but just important in terms of people that I go to for guidance or perspectives, or when I'm having challenges. And so I suggest anyone in TA that's going through that is just to open yourself up to your network, talk to people that you trust, ask for feedback. I mean, I know there's a term that people say, cliche, that feedback is a gift. I mean, I believe feedback is a gift, but for most people, feedback is not a gift. A gift is something you want.
Yeah, that's
Let's
true.
be honest. Most people don't want to hear about what they're doing wrong, right? So feedback is a muscle, right? And feedback is it's a muscle that we all need to develop if we want to be successful in our careers. And I think one of the things that has served me personally in my career really well is my ability to really take in feedback, and to whether I action it immediately or not, I always remember it. And I always think about, what in that feedback resonates with me and what doesn't, right? And even if it doesn't resonate with me and I don't, let it affect me personally, it's still someone else's experience or someone else's perspective, which makes it true, right? For them. So what can I do to change my own behavior, or how I work, or how I interact with that individual or other individuals who might feel the same way but don't speak up, in a way that would change that perspective of who I am? Even does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, it's a really, really important moment. I think use your network, ask others, like, very genuinely, what do you think I've done well in my, at XYZ job? Where do you think like my opportunities for growth are? Because I really, really want to know. And it's so hard to receive feedback, especially constructive feedback, but it's also really hard to give constructive feedback to people. And we can feel when someone's not receptive, right? And if you're a leader or you're a manager, your job is to give constructive feedback that might not resonate with someone. And you can pick up on that. And so if you're actually asking people in a very, very genuine way, like, hey, I really need this because I really want to grow, then I think you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine through this downturn. So yeah, work out, use your network, and ask for feedback all the time.
Yeah. The feedback thing is an absolute game changer. You have to take on all feedback you hear. I think with how I try and look at it is I try and understand the thought process behind someone's opinion. And then I obviously try and then make a call on that. But yeah, there is a lot of growth in getting feedback. We do like surveys to our clients, and then we have marketing person do like calls with them as well. And I always, before, I'm like, oh, can we just hide in a corner and just pretend that we're great at what we do? That'd be so much more easier rather than open ourselves up. But the learnings, and they say stuff that I would never even think of that we could do to like improve what we do. And that self-awareness, I think, to ask for feedback and to take it on would carry anyone through in their career. So
yeah, surveys are brilliant.
I realise we are quite a long way in, and we haven't really talked about what we were supposed to talk about, which was, I think with you, it might be good to just talk about talent acquisition functions. And I know you've built a lot of functions internally that have performed very well, have scaled in markets that were very competitive for certain talents. Now, obviously, you sort of moved up the ranks, but maybe if we're talking from a more senior point of view, where you're managing a team of TA professionals, a lot of people listen to this who are maybe the first recruiter in, or maybe just a smaller team, and they don't have as much resources, don't have as much maybe buy-in from the people above them. It's a common complaint. So what are like the key things if you were to build a talent function all over again, today? What are the key things that you would do?
Okay, so the key, I mean, number one is understanding what are the priorities for the founders and the senior executives. I mean, all of your talent strategy is going to come. I mean, part of it is based on, number of headcount, but part of it is also just based on the leadership team and the executive team and what they care about and what they're looking for. Depending on where you are in the organization, you may or may not have exposure to the executives on an ongoing basis. But I think that talent is always top of mind for every leader, every founder, every executive. So I think even if you're in a more sort of junior head of talent role, you can always sort of position like, I want to do a project to understand, what's most important at the senior leadership level from a talent perspective, and just, go through and meet with people and take notes and use that to inform a strategy. I think that anyone that's in a talent leadership role, when they think about the work that they do, I think it's really, really important that they think about the 3-year impact always. That's what executives do. That's what product leaders do. I think any leader of a department should think about the 3-year plan, because I mean, 6 months, it's very short, right? I mean, in Europe, sometimes notice periods can eat
Yep.
that up, right? And then headcount can change, especially in small companies. Headcount is fungible and changes all the time. You can either get a huge influx with a large scale investment at the senior leadership level, or you could have a hiring freeze, right? But I think if you kind of create a 3-year plan of what you want to build or what you think would be impactful for the roadmap of the company, you end up really being really impactful as a TA leader. From a tactical perspective, I mean, you asked what I do in building teams. I mean, I just have for the last year have been building a team, and there was a team in place, but it was very much, I think, thinking about that, mostly recruiters, a couple RCs and a couple sourcers. And I think that when you think about the talent function, really think about it like in a very holistic way. It's not just recruiting early career university people or mid-career people, but it's really kind of like, if you think about recruiting as an ecosystem, right? You think you need to be data driven. Data driven is just, I think, the beginning and the end of everything you do in talent, right? I think back in the day, there was people that were like, I'm not a data, I don't know data, I don't know data. You have to know data. Everything about recruiting is data, is based on data. Headcount is based on data. Salaries is based on data. Everything we do has to be data driven. And so understanding, budgets, understanding product roadmap, understanding revenue targets, understanding all of that should be sort of pulled into the strategy as a TA leader. I think gone are the days of just being able to fill roles. What companies need more and more are strategic talent leaders. And so I think one of the hardest things that I've seen is people that move from ICs to managers. I mean, it's been an interesting journey for me, because prior to Chainalysis, my previous company, my team was a very, very senior, seasoned organization. And so all of my leaders were, had been in their careers for as long as me, or some of them longer. And so these were all senior leaders reporting into me with very senior teams underneath them. And so it was interesting at Chainalysis to go to a newer company where people are just more earlier career, and seeing that transition for people that go from ICs to managers, and understanding or go from a manager role into a head of talent role. And I think that it takes time to move from this like tactical vision of TA and more of like, this is part of the company roadmap, right? And because of that, we have to think about less about just time to fill and conversion rates and how many butts and seats we have, and more about like, do these hires make sense for the roadmap? For what I know today, right? You've got a bunch of new funding. Obviously, you've got a roadmap in place. Where do the investments want to be made? Do you want to make it in software spend? Do you want to make it in headcount? Do you want to make it in agency fees? what's most important to the founders. Or, on the flip side, no funding's coming in, we're having revenue issues. How can we either redeploy our existing resources in TA into other needed functions around the organization, or do we need to have some hard conversations? I think just being a strategic leader is really, really important. Even if you're just a head of TA with a team of 6, like you've got to think about yourself less of from the IC perspective and more of a department head perspective, even if you're in a small company.
But that's hard, right? Going from a lot of the stuff you said, you can measure time to fill, salaries, headcount, hard and fast numbers, tangible. The stuff you're talking about, more strategic stuff, obviously you can measure it, but it's longer term. I don't know how you found that in terms of like letting go almost of the kind of day to day and the stuff that you can measure to this holistic. I mean, I've found from obviously I'm on the other side of the fence to a certain extent. I found that very difficult at the start. I like to measure things and that sort of stuff. So, was that hard for you?
Well, I think time to fill is very important, right? Yeah. And I think, acceptance rates are also important. However, the thing about data is a data point. Data is a data point. It's not dogma. And I think what often happens too much is people tout around, I have 100% acceptance rate. Oh, my time to fill is really, really short. Well, that could mean that you're shuffling referrals through. Yeah. That could mean that you're using money and throwing ridiculous salary offers so that no one ever says no. And without a lot of oversight, that is what often happens, especially in smaller organizations, because recruiters are told that this is what they need to focus on. And that can obviously enforce behaviors you don't actually want to see, right? Because every company's largest investment are the people they hire. And so if you are just shuffling referrals and you're not actually making sure you're hiring the best of the best person that you can hire because you wanted your time to fill to be really quick, or you're giving someone a $60,000 raise, even though you're a Series B or Series A company and you can't afford that. That becomes problematic, especially in scale. And that is the biggest problem that I see in TA right now, is that people focus on these metrics. Now, time to fill, acceptance rate, those are really important data points and especially important metrics to follow when you have an engine. So when you are a big tech company, those are very important metrics to follow, right? But when you are a small company, you need to be really careful about those metrics. And those metrics to me are more of a flag, right? So your time to fill is really fast. Well, let's look at the people you're hiring. Are you hiring the best quality talent? If you do a survey of the hiring managers and the senior executives, well, they don't always feel that you are. So you might be hiring people quickly, but you're not necessarily bringing them the talent that they really, really want to see.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
often, sorry, carry on.
No, that's okay. And so that becomes, I think, problematic that I see with a lot of early career in smaller companies.
I see that it's almost like a disconnect between the recruiter and the hiring internal recruiter and the hiring manager. We see that we can pick it up pretty quickly if we've started partnering with the company, and if the recruitment team doesn't have that relationship with hiring managers, but also the buy-in from above and taken seriously within the business, that we see that as a real problem, because this, especially as an external partner, there's so many roadblocks that you have to overcome, and you get blindsided by so many things because there's a lot of issues with the function in the business.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're seeing that. What often happens when a company tends to have heavier agency relationship, that's usually a sign that they don't necessarily have a lot of faith in their internal TA team, right? And so, and not to say that working with agencies isn't advantageous, because I think the amazing thing about working with agencies is you then also have a flex, right? Like you have a huge engine, but don't necessarily have the budget roadmap to support that engine, then it doesn't actually make sense. So I think working with outside partners is a really important part of any TA strategy. I think where it's problematic is when you have that is your main strategy and you're
Yeah.
always engaging agencies on every single search. That is a sign that the TA isn't viewed as a partner.
Yeah. No, I agree. We, the way I see it is that we can add value to a business at certain points, at certain
Yeah.
stages, in certain positions. Um, and it's about timing and it's about the nature of the role and things like that. But yeah, I know, obviously. So one thing I did want to go on to, a lot of externals probably listen to this podcast as well. I get a few messages, and some maybe like to think that agency partnerships are the solution to all hiring problems. Sadly, they're not. But you've obviously done this for a while and have partnerships, I'm guessing, with plenty of headhunters. What do you look for, and what makes a really, really good sort of agency partnership with an internal talent team? And I'm sure you've also had some pretty bad experiences as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think anywhere where there's like a true partnership to me is the ideal agency relationship. Um, and sort of a vice versa true partnership. So should I have um, I worked with a agency on a role when I first joined Chainalysis. They had engaged the agency prior to me joining, and it was for a senior leadership role. And it was so great working with those recruiters because I'm someone who has a deep network in the technology space. And they were bringing, I had done some of these searches on my own when I worked at Slack. And so I'd hired a lot of executives, and I didn't really work with agencies at Slack. Just, I think we worked with Jana Rich once, but most of the time it was just done in-house just because we built this really strong sort of engine in-house. But um, there was such a great back and forth. I mean, obviously they were owning the relationship. They were showing us some great candidates, but they ended up calling me and asking me, well, what do you think about this executive? We heard about this person, and vice versa. I gave them some insights on certain leaders around the Valley that I thought were good. And I just thought there was a lot of really great mutual respect. And I think to me, that was sort of the ideal relationship. I think that, again, with the boom that we've seen since 2011, there's a lot of opportunities for agencies out there to give sort of high quality, high touch searches. And then there's also some companies that I've known a few people who are in-house recruiters who started their own sort of like RPO, where they basically have essentially a bunch of agency recruiters who just go in and become the engine within those companies. And so again, just making sure to your question, some of the situations I've seen that have not worked out so well is in those RPO situations where, they sell a bill of goods and they don't deliver. Right. And I think that that's a really important thing to think about from an agency relationship, because if you don't deliver what you say you're going to deliver, then that is going to negatively affect your business for a long time, right? There's it's same when we talk about the network effect as an individual contributor, and as an executive in tech, it's the same to do with agencies, right? You can just take that into into a company. And if, for example, say that relationship I just mentioned that was great when I first joined Chainalysis, if that had been really, really bad, then I'll remember that, and that executive would remember that. And when we, went to a new company, then someone asked, should we use that agency? We'd probably be like, I don't know.
It sticks. It
It
sticks.
sticks.
Yeah. With RPOs in general, so it's not something we do. And the reason is that, obviously we have our own business model, but do you lose your flex a little bit with the RPO or embedded model, because it's sort of heavy duty? You have a whole team coming in. I know it's different for companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a model that only should be used in, I don't know if times of desperation is the term, but We used an RPO model at one company I was at when we went through like this unexpected, huge hypergrowth. I won't say why because it'll give away the company, but um, it was basically unplanned. It was like suddenly we're going to triple the headcount and we need to deliver on it within, and it was based on, sales hiring. And so there was like a business, use case. So we needed sort of bodies in place. I think that the problem is that you can, RPOs are just like any other company. They're going to be hiring people quickly. And the faster you hire, there's a term, fire fast, hire slowly. That's very true for TA as well. And so if these RPOs are like onboarding new recruiters that may or not be that good, or new managers that may or may not be that effective, and then they're coming in, it can be problematic. I don't see the RPO model being something that I would use strategically. I think having been in tech now for 20 years, I have amazing recruiters that I know from like 2008 that I could hire on a dime. I know recruiters. I have a plethora of amazing recruiters in my network that I've both been partners to and that I've managed, and leaders I've managed. And so that for me, any company that I work at, there's not only amazing people that come through via referrals, but there's so many people in my network that I could sort of call on, that my reliance on things like RPOs or agencies tend to be less than some other leaders. But I do think they have a time and a place. And I think when we're going through a time of instability, it's a really great time to be more focused on agencies and that business model, because you don't necessarily want to make the investment in-house if you're just going to have to riff people in a couple months.
Yeah, when the timing is right, something I always say to the team, people will want to work with us when the timing's right and when they're ready to. But yeah, the best partnerships we have are, I would say, well, it depends really, but like smaller talent teams.
Yeah.
Who, it's not even the case that, so we do obviously software engineering, a lot of senior leadership engineering hires, and yeah, they could probably do them on their own, but it would take up a lot of their week and a lot of their time. They could do it, but they see that their time should be used on other stuff. And if they have a trusted partner, i.e. us or someone else, they can just take care of it, bang, and then they can just do what they do best, or they can work more on strategy side of things, or all this holistic stuff. So yeah, time and a place. But I know, obviously I speak to a lot of talent people, and there's mixed reviews of different experiences.
Yeah. And we're definitely on the end of that, right? I think the way that you can be effective, again, the partnership is so important, and the quality of the talent that you can bring in and what you say you can deliver, that you actually deliver on it. And I think one of the things, and this is also tied to feedback, right? Like if you feel like you are not delivering on what you said you're going to deliver on, you should be the one to raise it. Like one of the things that I think is a really, really important piece for everyone, be it if you're an IC or be it if you're an executive and a leader, is be the one to call out either problems or areas that aren't working before anyone else, because that builds your credibility. Like I often said that to my exec recruiters, that an important piece, when especially the higher up you go in an organization and the more senior people you're working with, people tend to have a higher attention to detail the more senior they are. And so if you're presenting something to them and they're going through it and you're not calling out, like say they asked for someone that has deep infrastructure experience and has worked in high growth companies. And then you're presenting someone that's never worked at a company larger than 400 people. And they're more, full stack, and they've never been an infra leader.
Yeah.
And you're just like, hey, I think they're really great and X, Y, Z. And you're just selling. And you're not being like, this is with the areas that I don't think that they're so good in. It's almost like you're doing the anti-sell which I think agencies can sometimes get wrong, and that they're trying to like convince someone to take a candidate. But I think where you can be a really effective partner is go, I think this person is great here, but I actually think that this is where they might not be so great, and this is why. But I still think you should talk to them because of XYZ.
Yeah.
Right. Because anything that you see is they're already in the sea. And if they're the ones to point it out, then you lose the credibility. If you're the one to point it out, then they see you as a partner.
That honesty.
Someone once said to me that every opportunity that you have with a senior leader, every interaction, be it like a one-on-one or a meeting, is either an opportunity for you to show them you deserve either more scope or more experience or less. Right. And I don't want people to like take away that they have to be completely guarded in who they are and not be their authentic person at work. But I think that's just really important to think about, that, work is work. Right. And how can you be an outside agency recruiter, an executive or head of talent within an organization, or a leader, how can you always think about the way that you interact with people and how they interact with you, and how they are maybe thinking about, oh, maybe this is someone I want to partner with from an agency perspective. This is someone who I think deserves more scope, or this is someone that I need to keep my eye on to maybe move into a manager role in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Lots of wisdom. If you have time, I would love to talk a bit about yourself really quickly.
Okay.
So your profile is a pretty decent tech portfolio in itself. And obviously you've risen the ranks and you've been, heading up different talent functions and done a hell of a lot. Why do you think you've got all these promotions and built all these functions? I mean, it doesn't just come from expertise, it comes from things like drive and ambition. And I know it's important no matter what industry you're in, but where has that actually come from? Because tons of people go into talent and do great jobs, but they haven't done what you've done.
Well, I will take all the compliments. Thank you. That's very kind. I think that the unique piece for myself is and this is, in different work environments, my working style can sort of be thought of in different ways, but I was asked this by my first job in tech, where the CEO of the agency, he sat me down. It was literally a 6-hour interview. I got up to like have bio breaks like once or twice, and he just wanted to talk to me. It was the weirdest interview I've had to this date. And I remember him asking me, do you think yourself as a competitive person? And I sat there with the question, and I said, I think of myself as a highly competitive person with myself. And I don't think of myself as a competitive person with other people. I actually shy away from that, and I don't enjoy that. And whenever I've been in situations where there's been maybe some political maneuverings that I'm seeing be suggested, competing with peers, that has the opposite effect on me. Whereas like I'm not going to play that game. I'm really hyper competitive with myself and the work that I do. And I don't know if I'm a perfectionist, because I'm definitely not someone that, will be buttoned up in every aspect of my life. But I do it's that sort of I always want to do my best. And I always want to have impact in my work. And I always want my work to speak for itself. And so because of that, I feel that I'm never satisfied with just delivering on what is asked. I always want to do better. If that makes sense. And so that is, I think, served me well in some organizations. And, to be honest, like, you look at my trajectory and it looks wonderful, but there's been a lot of hard times there's a story behind that story that's, not on LinkedIn, and I won't obviously share it on YouTube or on a podcast, but it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been, rife in situations where I've had to deal with overt bias and behaviors that haven't, like, situations at work that have not been fun to deal with, and situations where I've been passed up for promotions or maybe been severely underpaid compared to everyone else on the team. I remember a situation once where I was in a meeting and I had my RC in the meeting. I was a leader, and one of the executives kept asking my RC questions as opposed to me. He was a male. They were both male. And it was a very odd experience of overt bias that I was like, this is very strange. Everything that he's telling you is stuff, the work that I have asked him to do and that we're presenting. But anyways, so I think that if people can take away anything, is that competition against your peers is not something that you should be focused on. Be competitive with yourself. Think about what you want to do. So I think that's a piece that's made me successful. And the other piece is the curiosity piece. So if you look at my career, I haven't been someone who was like, I'm a tech recruiter. I'm going to be a tech sourcer, then I'm going to be a recruiter, and then I'm going to be a tech recruiting manager, and then I'm going to be a head of talent. To me, I always wanted to understand every aspect of what means TA. I've never run an ops team, but I'm incredibly data driven and I think about operations and everything I do. So I don't think I need to be a head of ops. And I'm at, the VP level now. I think now when I think about the work that I do now and how it's kind of blurred, especially working at Chainalysis and working in smaller organizations, is a lot of the work I'm doing is not just TA focused, but it's also more like thinking about people and people programs and all that good stuff. And so I've always sort of danced this line around, okay, I understand tech recruiting now in and out. I know what high functioning. So I need to understand sales. Okay, I understand sales. Now I need to understand international recruiting. I need to understand what it means in EMEA, what it means in APAC, the nuances of recruiting, hiring in Japan, the nuances of hiring in Denmark, the nuances of hiring in Brazil, in Colombia. Like that to me is my university. It is like what gets me excited. So I think it's that mix of being very competitive and also being just a lifelong learner, wanting to learn more and more and more and more, and never being satisfied. And so, maybe someday I will be a chief people officer. Maybe someday I'll be a CEO of like a really innovative tech software that hasn't been like HR, TA tech software. I think that's a space that is ripe for innovation. I think the possibilities are sort of limitless when I think about what I want to do in the future, and then hopefully retire someday because I do have young children.
If you get
I'd
around
like to
to
have
it.
more time with them.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we could talk all day, but we
Okay.
have to finish at some point.
Nice to see you, Alex.
Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. I can't wait to get this out. Honestly, covered so much. There'll be so much in there for the listeners, and it's been an education for myself. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.